show. And to all of y'all out in the Twitter and the YouTube worlds and Hollywood, especially Hollywood, this one's for you. Now, it's been a while since I made anything on this channel. That's because I've been a bit busy and quite a bit lazy. I'll admit it, I'm lazy, okay? But since I'm on vacation from work, and there's nobody available to look after the cat, and I have very few funds to actually go anywhere or do anything, I thought I'd put something out there because I have no excuses now. Essentially, this video is one, a take two, because the last one got a little ranty, and two, about something that is near and dear to a lot of us and has been grinding the gears of many worldwide. And that is remake, reboot, and sequel fatigue in Hollywood. We are kind of sick and tired of seeing the same shit done over and over again, just with new people and political correctness and politics shoved in. We're sick of seeing it. The whole point of media is escapism. We want to escape from the reality and see some fantasy world or some exaggeration, some it'll never happen type of thing, to escape from our boring, humdrum, work-a-day, grind lives. And y'all can't really seem to do anything new or anything really interesting anymore. People are getting sick of it. If you've been paying attention at all, you've seen it in the box office, unless you're doing films that are specifically targeted towards children. And yeah, it's got to be targeted to children, because children don't really care. They don't really have that much of an attention span, so you can drag them in all you want. It's the rest of us that kind of finding other shit to do. Mainly Netflix and YouTube and torrent streaming and seeking outside the West for our entertainment. Now here is a novel concept that will help you get back to basics kind of and get some new ideas in that you've been struggling with, and it's quite obvious. And that is to use a very rarely used concept these days, which only seem to have done like 4 times in the past 20 years. That is using these for your ideas. They're called books. Now, I know you did that. I know you can do it. You can do it. You did it with the Harry Potter series. You did it with the Twilight series. And that was shit. You did it with the Twilight fan fiction series, 50 Shades of Grey. That was extra shit. And you did it with, what was that one? The Hunter girl, what's her name? Jeez, what was that one? Yeah, it has something to do with a girl with bow and arrows and things like that. Oh, the Hunger Games. Yeah, you did it with that one. You can do it again. You can do it again. In fact, just this one book was made into a film back in the 70s, and this would be the only remake I would allow for, because you could probably do it better now. It comes with a series, but they only did one film, so plenty of stuff for you to work with. And it's a very feminist book too, very feminist series. This one is Gina M. All's Clan of the Cave Bear, and it's followed up. Here's your sequels right here. The Valley of Horses, The Mammoth Hunters, The Plains of Passage, The Shelters of Stone, and the Painted Caves, or the People of the Painted Caves. First film and sequels all lined up for you. And it's a feminist series. Why do I say it's a feminist series? Because it's about, the entire series is about one woman, a strong female character who is a badass, spends an entire book of the series by herself in the Ice Age. You don't get much more badass than that. Surviving on your own in the Ice Age as a woman. Badass. No? Works for me. And like I said, the last time that this book was even touched was back in the 70s. So before I was born. So my entire generation could be the audience for this series. Mercedes Lackey and Larry Dixon, but mostly Mercedes Lackey, has a tendency to do trilogies. This is the first book of one of her trilogies, The Black Griffin. And yeah, all of her trilogies are somewhat bound together, but it'd be like going with the MCU, only more entertaining. Why? Because you got the swords, you got the sorcery, you got the magical creatures that actually talk and are basically people in this can't even really call it trilogy, but it's basically. This one is the Griffin trilogy, where you got the Black Griffin, who goes through a magical portal that's breaking down and gets his feathers bleached, turns into the White Griffin in the second book. And the third one is the Silver Griffin, which is about his offspring who has to live up to Dad. A very conceited, very heroic, but still quite conceited dad. So that's one trilogy right there. She did another one that I enjoyed called Owl. Well, it was basically the Owl trilogy. Owl Flight, Owl Sight, Owl Night. About a teenage boy who runs away from his home because it was being invaded by bandits, so he thought. Turned out to be a cult. And runs to a forest filled with essentially a Native American type of culture who teaches him how to use the powers that he discovered that he had, and gives him an owl partner. Well, the owl found him, but you get what I mean. It's about magic and partnerships and self-discovery. Now the trilogy, loosely connected to the Griffin trilogy. And then you've got, now this is one of my favorite authors, Anne McCaffrey. Again, another author who does trilogies. Her trilogies are less connected. There's like 2 sets of trilogies that could be considered, well, no, 2 trilogies that could be considered connected, and one that could be turned into a TV series, because phew, that was a lot of books. For some strange reason, I can't find all of them in my flat, but I know I have all of them. Thanks, sis, for helping me clean up. This one, To Ride Pegasus, is the Pegasus trilogy. Essentially, in the not too distant future, like say 100, maybe 200 years from now, one of the TV psychics, and yeah, you've seen a lot of those. We know they exist. They're like, call me now. What was her name? I can't remember. Miss Cleo, I think. This guy gets into an accident, is pretty much in a coma, and they hook him up to an EEG machine, which measures your brain activity to make sure you're not dead. Turns out, that's how they discovered that psychic powers are actually real. 'Cause he has an episode while he's in the thing, and it registers. He wakes up and tells his prediction. That sets the whole thing off. So essentially, psychics become an industry unto themselves, with a union and all that, and they get legislation made to protect them and things like that. And then in the second book and the third, in the second book they get drafted to help build a space station to launch humanity out into the wider universe. 'Cause as they're now unionized and whatnot, and they've discovered that their powers make things a lot easier, they also have the unfortunate knock-on effect to make construction safer for the average Joe. The average Joe doesn't have to deal with heavy machinery anymore, so they don't get crushed anymore, so psychics have to do the heavy lifting. And in that one, they drag pretty much all registered psychics to the space station to help build it. Thanks to a Russian. You could really make a lot out of that second book. And yeah, this one here, Pegasus in Flight. You can really get a lot out of this one because you got the whole Russian conspiracy, you've got a human trafficking ring, and then you've got the whole psychic powers thing, you got space travel, you've got massive slums because let's face it, I think this is a century after the first book, and you've got what else you got? You got huge slums and a lot of pollution, which is why they're focusing so hard on building the space station to deal with the whole overpopulation thing, to, shoot people off into space and get rid of them. Pegasus in Space, they've built the space station, they've established a small moon base as the next launch pad, so to speak. The kids in the second one, an Indian girl with the power to get any language that she wants out of people's minds, so she's basically become the translator for the entire series, because, well, you can't really hide anything from her, can you? And the paraplegic boy who basically helped keep things stable on Earth finally gets his chance to go into space. Well, it's quadriplegic, neck down, nothing. And this is a carry on from that. And the international human trafficking ring that they mostly captured is still somewhat active, and they become terrorists. Very interesting book. Very good follow. So, first film, first sequel, conclusion. Don't have to remake shit. It's right here. It's all right here. And this one of my absolute favorite books. John Ringo. This is part of a trilogy. There's this one, there is the Emerald Sea, and one more that I haven't read yet. But this one, as you can see, I've kind of worn it out a bit. I've read it like over a dozen times. It's that good. I only just got the other two because Kindle is so cheap. In this one, it's set, somewhere in the 20,000s or 30,000, somewhere very, 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 very extremely far off into the distant future, where our technology is so advanced that we have medical nanites, nanobiology, little itty bitty tiny computers in our bloodstream that will heal and fix pretty much anything. We've got personal force fields to keep any external damage from happening. And we've got a computer that can provide us with everything we could ever possibly want and keeps everything safe. And unlike most sci-fi sci-fi books that have computers in them, the computer was designed specifically so that it doesn't actually care. It doesn't develop any feelings. Its only purpose is to keep the human race safe, even if it's from themselves. Not to the point where it'll lock you up in a room by yourself, but to the point where any type of explosives don't really work, because there was a bit of a natural disaster where a volcano could have blown out half the planet, but because they had the system up, it dampened the explosion. So yeah, you've got a computer that can give you whatever you want. You've got medical nanites that can fix whatever ails you. So that you're basically living hundreds of years. You don't reach middle age until you're like 300. And because you've got these medical nanites, you can do whatever you want with your body. Any type of plastic surgery you've ever wanted, ever thought of, is available to you. And it's basically the socialist utopia that everybody keeps dreaming of, but can't actually happen until you've got technology to that level. There's no scarcity, there's no premature death, because, well, when you've got nanites in your blood, how the hell are you gonna die? It fixes aging, it fixes your fertility rates. Women don't have periods anymore in his book. And what essentially happens to screw it up, because you know something's gotta screw it up, is a system like this needs a shit ton of energy, right? Right. And it needs to not have too much of a drain on it, because you know what happens when you put too much of a drain on your computer systems. Like my potato of computer here is, it's potato. That's why my quality is going to be a little bit worse, because I normally do this type of thing on a phone, but my phone's got no memory. As I was saying, when you have that much of a drain on a computer system, what happens? It crashes. And there's a council of, I think, 12 to 18 people who do what little politics there's left to do in this world. And a handful of them, led by one crazy person, is not happy with utopia. They're not happy with paradise. You're always gonna end up with at least one. And with this one, he decides that people need to get back to work. Which, fair enough, because it is a human condition where if you don't have something to do, something to keep yourself active, things tend to not go well. We tend to suffer from depression when we're inactive. That's why after people retire, if they don't find a hobby or some kind of mental or physical activity to fill their days with, they tend to die. It's unfortunate, but look at the statistics. So what he does is he stages a coup, basically. He stages a coup, which, when they're firing plasma blasts at each other using the computer system and trying to shield from plasma blasts from the other party using the computer system, it crashes the system. So everybody else who was on the system, who didn't have the clearances that they did and didn't have the credits for power that they did, essentially screwed. And everyone's personal fields drop, nanites go inactive, and you had people working in molten cores and on the sun. Bye-bye. Never even noticed it happening, and just gone. You got people working deep sea. It took them a little longer, but gone. And there was one that they basically had written out in the book, where a girl was doing some kind of advanced surfing out in the middle of the ocean. All of the sharks' safety protocols have been turned off, and she was out in the middle of the ocean, like way hundreds of miles out in the middle of the ocean. Yeah, the last I saw of her in the book was her swimming around trying to call for the computer to save her. we can guess what happened to her. Anyone who had specific modifications done to them, they needed the computer to work with, like anybody who had wings, gone. And people had a tendency to turn themselves into basically computer programs. So, gone. If the system could get back up, they could be backed up, but gone. And in this entire series, there's a handful of communities running about. Much like we have Renaissance fairs today, they had the similar thing, only it was just pre-industrial LARPing. Just prior to the Industrial Revolution, so they still had some steam run technology, but not anything really explosive, because with much of our technology you need the explosives and high heat, and the computer, those protocols are still working. So you couldn't use guns to fight the war. So what do? Swords, longbows, crossbows. So yeah, it's not quite medieval, but damn close. And the book revolves around one such community where one of the guys who basically has made it his life figures he was just gonna sit around, relax, enjoy, and then the system goes down, and he prepares the community to accept the refugees, and from there he becomes one of the leaders in the war for humanity, basically. So yeah, John Ringo, excellent trilogy, excellent film, potentially. Film, sequel, and conclusion. You don't have to remake shit. And I don't think anyone's ever made a film on this one. And this one book alone, and I'm dating myself here, is over 20 years old. In fact, all of the books I've just shown you are over 20 years old. Ugh. And the Anne McCaffrey series that could be made into a TV series rather than just a film was the Dragon Riders of Pern series. Essentially, humanity, sick of dealing with the space wars and corrupt businesses and corrupt officials, decides to give up the high-tech lifestyle and go somewhat agrarian with just enough technology to be comfortable. They seek out a planet that nobody's gonna care about, as in not a whole lot of resources, not a whole lot of wealth hidden in it, and they do a brief survey, which when they get there and they settle, it turns out they needed to do a more in-depth survey. And while they're there, they get settled. There's a lot of farmers and the few farmers left, and the travelers and tinkerers, and a diverse community with a few scientists and biologists thrown in. They get settled, and a couple of their kids find these little creatures that resemble the mythological dragons, about yet big, with the wings and four paws and claws and fire breathing, and they cute little dragons, essentially. And after those two little kids have grown into teenagers, something that they probably should have done a better survey on decides to come around. Here's where the disaster kicks in. Because when the original survey went out, they noticed that there were no trees on the planet. There were lots of grasses, and it was quite watery. There was a lot of water. And they noticed massive circles were essentially crop circles, but they didn't really try and figure out what did it. They should have figured out what did it. Because every, I think, 50 to 100, every, I can't remember how many years, this cloud that they noticed in their survey that was leaving, this, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's OORT, I think it's Oort cloud, passes by along with a red planet, or red comet, passes by, dragging this cloud behind it, and this cloud has spores in it. And these spores devour anything biological they touch, and they drop onto the planet every time that comet or planet goes around. Meaning, if anything organic is out in the open, yeah, it's screwed. And the only thing that can destroy those spores, which come down in clumps of threads, is drowning in the ocean, which is why it's heavily abundant with fish, or fire. So guess what they did, considering they still had biologists and some technology? You guessed it. They made proper full-size dragons. And not just any dragons. The dragons that they made require a human companion in order to coordinate, so to speak. So someone to work with them. And to keep them tame. So they create these dragons, they pick people. McCaffrey tends to like psychic power, so they pick people with empathy, and they manage to battle off the spores. And during this series, they battle back the spores, and then disaster strikes again in that the place they settled had a few active volcanoes. So, massive volcano goes off, they have to evacuate up into the north. They lose quite a bit of their technology because, as with many sci-fi shows, they had an AI, which kept records and things of that nature. And the continuation of the series is basically what happens to the generations after they go north. And in much of it, at least twice, they kind of forget about the thread because, as I said, it might be 50, it might be 100, I can't remember. But yeah, it stops dropping for quite long periods. So people forget the purpose of the dragons and they go, why should we support you anymore? That type of thing. But yeah, a society, a civilization basically evolves on this planet of the people who settled there and their descendants. So, an entire TV series right there. And from what I can see from my bookshelf, I got over 20 books. So, that's a long series for you to work with. Again, you don't have to remake shit. You don't have to chop and change shit. Ideas. Full shelf of ideas. Stop making remakes. Nobody wants to see them no more. Again, with McCaffrey, there's the Freedom Trilogy. And yeah, it's again a trilogy. First film, sequel, conclusion sequel. 3 films. Right off the bat, you don't have to make remakes because you're claiming you want to pull on the nostalgia, but you change something that automatically, I'm trying not to swear too hard, screws up the film. Like with Ghostbusters. If you've seen my review of that several months well, a couple of years ago, you'd know that I actually tortured myself by watching that. And no matter who they would have cast, man, woman, trans, or all together, it would have been a shit show. It was that bad. The script was god awful. And that's what happens every time you do a remake. Every time. You change one little thing. Oh, it won't matter. It's just one little thing. Nobody's really gonna care. It's just one little thing. And you end up screwing up the whole thing. Child's Play. The premise behind the original Child's Play was a guy uses voodoo on his deathbed to possess a doll. The new one, an AI possesses the doll. The hell. Now, not only is all of the fear factor and the spook of it gone, but you do it badly. We're not supposed to know when the doll is going to do some bad shit. We're supposed to be scared. That's the point of a horror. Especially a slasher fic. And to have all of the slashy bits off camera? Are you trying to make it a family film? But yeah, we don't need any more remakes. Please stop. Please stop. And the Disney, stop with the live actions. Use more folklore. There is plenty folklore still out there yet to be done. Stop with the live action. Please. Because I'm not happy with the whole live action Little Mermaid nonsense. And it's not because Ariel's black. That's not entirely it. It's because not only did you race swap, you basically given black people a hand-me-down and expected us to be happy about it. I don't want no hand-me-downs. I want new characters. We have black folklore. We have African folklore. In fact, I read one the other day. It's not something you'd make a Disney film out of, but they do exist. And if you can't find black folklore, make some up. Or pick some folklore from another culture that no one's ever heard of before. Hell, you get close. Egyptian folklore. There's shit tons of it. They've got a whole pantheon. Just like you got Greek mythology and Roman mythology and Norse mythology, you've got Egyptian mythology. Use it! Ugh. Yeah. Yesterday I read West African Folktale. Wasn't exactly Disney worthy. It was Death and the Boy. That automatically does not make it Disney worthy, but you get my point. Again, books. There's thousands of ideas in them. Use these. You used to do it all the time. Use them. I'm sick of seeing repeats, remakes, and sequels that nobody asked you for. Honestly. But yeah, I'm still getting a little bit ranty, but it's somewhat of a coherent rant. And yeah, stop with the live actions. Nobody asked you for that.